Ready? Good afternoon. This is session 11E, Data Means Business, with Jason Foster and Ashley Brinegar. Did I get that right? Just like vinegar? Yep. My name is David Levine. I'm the global leader for digital transformation at sorry, I almost said my old company name, New Era Technology. My company was acquired last September by a large conglomerate. So this is, however, my 9th year here at this conference as a sponsor and as a participant. It's my favorite event every year because it's just about education and people helping each other learn how to do the things they need to do better. And it helps me advance my cause with my clients because they're smarter after I bring them here. And with that, and questions towards the end, there'll be a Q&A session. I need you to take the microphone. I'll bring it to you. Speak into the microphone so that it's recorded and audible in the playback content later on. And Jason, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. And I like the analogy there of education to make everyone smarter. And yeah, this is great. So thanks very much for coming along. Thanks to the CDOIQ team for having us and having me. My name's Jason. I'm the founder and chief executive at Cynozure. We're a data and analytics strategy company. I'm a data strategist by trade, having been a data leader in industry. Found there wasn't an organization that could support the kind of work that I was doing, so I left and set up that kind of business, and now we help organizations across the world. Pleasure to be here. Just a little bit about who we are. We help organizations to reach their data and AI potential. We support through strategic advice and direction setting and road mapping. We help with execution of data strategies through technology implementation and business transformation and change. We do not only the what you need to do, but also the why you need to do it, how you need to do it, and then we help you get things done. So end-to-end, cradle to grave, if you like. We do that across the world in public, private, and the not-for-profit sector. Some large global organizations, some smaller regional organizations in all industries. What's really interesting is that there is real consistency between the challenges, real consistency between the problems, real consistency between the kinds of things that people are trying to get better at. And we share those stories between industries, and we share the stories with you guys to help everyone raise their level of capability in the game of data. So in this session, we've got 3 blocks to it. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to why it's important to have an organization that is adaptable and how to create a data strategy that supports that aim. Thank you. I'm then going to introduce Ashley Brinegar, who's going to come up, and we're going to turn what I've talked about into life a little bit and talk about how the work that we've done together has helped to create a more adaptable business and some of the work that Ashley's doing in her organization. And then we're open to the floor if we don't end up whittering on too long for questions from you guys about any of the things that we've talked about. So let me frame some things up. Everyone knows change happens. Change happens all the time. Some people say everything's speeding up, change is speeding up all the time. Actually, not sure that's necessarily true, but change is happening all the time. And if we look at that in context of the sort of longer term, over the last 70-odd years, birth rates have been declining in pretty much every country in the world. That's coupled with an aging population. So the number of people over the age of 65 at the moment is around 10%, and looks like it will be 1 in 4 in roughly sort of 80 years. So that changes our customers, it changes the way we live, it changes our healthcare systems, it changes the way we interact with each other, it changes the products and services that are needed in the market. Of course, a power shift is happening, and certainly in the financial markets and where money is made and where big organizations come from. So 10, 20 years ago, this was all made up of financial services and energy companies. Of course, this is all now made up of technology vendors. And the thing I quite like is, or find interesting, is NVIDIA is worth nearly as much as the whole of the real estate market put together. So the power shift has happened in terms of change, and a lot of those companies, and nearly all those companies, are certainly technology, if not data companies. Technology is incredible. It does have the power to change things, and it can change things. This is ChatGPT, the thing that will be mentioned in every session across the 3 days, I'm sure. It's amazing. It can do some incredible things. It's better at some things than other. But this technology and other technologies can deliver incredible capability in all sorts of walks of life. That may or may not be a good thing. This is an opportunity in some ways. This is also a threat in other ways. And this is the industries and the employment that's exposed by AI and potentially automation, and how much you believe some of this versus how much will actually happen. We'll see. So technology is great. It has the opportunity to do some great things, but also could be a threat to us as a society and to individuals. And then we think about change causing disruption. So this is an idea. Academia isn't particularly being disrupted, I don't think. But if we look at some of the data that we can see, so college tuition fees in the US versus the consumer price index, a huge disparity. It makes up a big difference. The total debt held by Americans is mostly, certainly in category terms, student loans. And I know some of that has changed over the last couple of years, and these are a few years old. But then we couple that with new players in the market, like Coursera and Udemy, who are making education accessible en masse online. How that gives new avenues for people to get educated, and maybe academia is something that's ripe for disruption. Global price rises. This is eggs over a 12-month period. Went from just under $2 to just over $4, but speaking to someone in that trade tells me it's come back down a little bit yesterday. But global price rises, the raw materials are going up. That impacts on how we make products, how we make services, the cost that's passed on to individuals in supermarkets and in products that get made. And depressing slide, potentially this leads to some challenge in the short term, and maybe there's some challenging times ahead. So what does that all mean? So we know there's change. We know change is going to continue. Some of it is long term, hundreds of years. Some of it is very short term, 1 year price changes. There's also change that happens inside the four walls of your organization. I've talked about some quite big macro changes, but leadership changes, in fact, sometimes the whole leadership changes at once. I was talking to someone yesterday, and almost all the board changed overnight, and that changed her role as the chief data officer quite significantly. Sometimes projects change. The dashboard that you were building, something's different required. Sometimes budgets are cut. So change happens. So we need to create organizations that can cope with change, right? We need to create organizations that can adapt to the change that's happening longer term, can plan for that change from an adaptability perspective, but also can deal with that change day to day, day in, day out in the way that we work. The impact of not being adaptable is a very well-told story of the Netflix and Blockbuster conundrum challenge. This is an organization that couldn't find a way of adapting, couldn't see that they needed to adapt their business model to make sure that they didn't go out of business, and that's what ended up happening. Although the good news is there's an awesome social media handle run by Blockbuster that you should follow, because it's very funny on Twitter. They just take the mick out themselves the whole time about going out of business. But that's the metaphor for what happens if you don't adapt. So what does this all mean? What's this all got to do with data? What's it got to do with data leadership and why we're all in the room? So everyone in this room, it's a data conference, knows the power that data can have to give insight, to give foresight, to give business leaders the kind of the steering wheel they need to navigate through all of these challenges, to prepare for the changes, to prepare for the challenges that they have. And us as data leaders need to help create an organization that is capable and can cope with this level of change. Data can do that. And if we can give people the tools that enable them to do that, then we can have an organization that can cope, can adapt. But it's quite challenging sometimes to work out how we do that, right? Because change is happening all the time, we've got the train on the track moving, and we're trying to lay track at the same time. So knowing how the jigsaw puzzle fits together is important. And what I want to share is a few ways that you can start thinking about how to create an adaptable data strategy that leads to having an organization that can be adaptable. So the first, my favorite, the biggest one, the most important one, don't leave the room without listening to this one, is creating an organization that culturally is guided by data, that uses data to help drive its business, drive its operations, drive its decision-making, about strategy, about day-to-day operational decision-making. Now, if you think about it, if you're an organization that has a culture that uses data to drive decisions, and we know change happens, then when we're sideswiped by something like a pandemic, or somebody leaves, or we have cost challenges through price rises, we have the team, the mindset, the behaviors of people that know that they can use data to help them navigate their way out of those problems. Without that being a cultural norm, what happens, and what you would have seen during the pandemic, for example, is a bit of panic mode. Let's just make some decisions quickly about what we need to do without really having the proper tools in their hands to make the right choice about where they should go. So having the right mindset, the right behavior at a leadership level and across the organization that is driven by in the DNA to make decisions, to use the data that they have to drive how it's moving forward is critical to be a business that's adaptable. The second one, also my favorite, and I'm going to say that on all of these because they're all very, very important and I can't prioritize them, is an absolute militant focus on business outcomes. It is no longer really acceptable and not really the modus operandi to put a long, multi-year foundational program in place that is going to, like a data governance program that's going to take you 3 years to do without focusing on some very specific business outcomes, business value that you're aiming to deliver. Orientating around business outcomes, orientating around the strategic direction of the business, orientating around problems that exist today, opportunities that exist today, is how you start to drive a business forward and create buy-in, create opportunity for business leaders across the organization to understand what this whole data thing's about. If we make data about data, and we don't make data about delivering benefit, delivering outcome, delivering value, then it's really hard to A, get funding, B, prove your worth, C, prove value, and most importantly, you can't be adaptable. So when change happens, if we focus on the problem that that's creating, then we focus on the right things. Stealing some thoughts from how startup land worked, leveling up iteratively is a really powerful way to make sure that you're not only focusing on the right things, but you're doing it in a way that's careful, focused on outcomes and business value, as I mentioned in the previous slide. But when we think about transformational change, people think transformational change comes from doing huge programs. Actually, I believe and see and feel that transformational change happens with small, iterative, incremental improvements that, as a result, create transformational change. So if we build capability iteratively, if we deliver value iteratively, if we solve problems iteratively, they add up to some really great things. And the best thing about that is we deliver value along the way. We're not waiting towards the end of a huge program to deliver value. We're delivering value as we move through. This is a framework we have called the Level Up framework, which helps organizations to sort of figure out the route they take through sort of maturing their capability. And early in this, what's important is establishing the agenda, getting clarity about the size of the prize, the point of doing this stuff, and getting buy-in and commitment to the journey. And then the next stage of proving value becomes critical to show and build credibility for what data can achieve in your organization. And importantly, if we think about incremental business value of constantly delivering value all the time, rather than trying to chase a big prize at some point in the future, we can adapt the organization quite nicely. Now, next is treating data as a product and the craft of management that requires. So forever, we've had physical products, shoes, jackets, food, and these physical products have been created and designed and are successful because they solve a problem. They have features and benefits that we all like and want, and that's why we buy them. They add value to our lives. They have someone who's responsible for them in the organizations that run them, and they have metrics and measures that tell the organization whether they're successful or not. Are we selling enough? Have we got too much stock? What does it look like it's going to take in the future? Roll forward a few years, we had digital products, and digital products are essentially a digital manifestation of physical products. They still serve a purpose. They still have features and benefits. They're still there to add value. They still have someone who's responsible for the product in its entirety and sections of the product. So if we think about Spotify, it's a big platform and it has lots of digital products within it, like Discover Weekly, if anyone uses Spotify. That is a really valuable digital product in its own right. Someone is responsible for making sure it gets listened to, people come back to it, it's serving up the right music. So digital products are the same as physical products, but just you can't quite touch and feel them in quite the same way. Now we start thinking about data products and packaging up data in a way and thinking about data in a way that's a sort of same concept. We need data products like dashboards, algorithms, data integrations that packaged together have value, solve a purpose, have features and benefits, have someone who looks after them, have metrics that you can track them by. And the brilliant thing about these data products is that in of themselves they can be valuable. So an algorithm that helps you make a prediction about something. But even better, they serve to judge the performance of your physical and digital products or services. So the craft of then how we do that allows you to be agile and effective, because what you're doing is creating data products that solve a problem. And if we're creating data products that solve a problem, we're nicely aligned back to some of the things I talked about earlier in terms of business outcomes. Now, a challenging one for many, particularly in more legacy organizations or more traditional organizations, is most businesses have been set up with organizational design that was created in the 70s when it was very sort of top-down hierarchical decision-making, communication, and a sort of structure and setup, capability by capability. Finance sat here, HR sits here, and then in the data function, you have data engineers here, you have data scientists, we have data architects, and they all do their bit of the puzzle. Now, the problem with that is that you're creating silos by design. And all of the data leaders in the world are going, how do we break down silos? And then they build their teams in silos. It's fascinating. So when we start to flip this around and go, well, how do we solve that? What do we do? So if we're going to focus on business outcomes, why don't we design our organizations that are focused on business outcomes? Instead of designing our organizations by functional capability, let's design our organizations by solving a problem. The problem of the supply chain's too slow or the warehouse isn't as effective as it could be, and build an organic squad that has all the skills you need to solve that problem, and their job is to solve that problem. If the problem goes away, team disbands and solves a different problem. It might be something that always needs work. We always need to improve the efficiency of a warehouse or of a logistics route planner. The power this has in terms of adaptability is you're focusing those teams on solving problems. And when you can have a team that focuses on solving problems, we can be more adaptable, we can be more effective, we can react to change a little bit more quickly. I'm finally going to mention technology. So the thing that slows people down the most is legacy, it's old processes, it's broken processes, it's repeated, it's inefficient, everyone's doing the same thing, everyone's creating the metrics multiple times, people are creating the same dashboards, people are reporting sales in a different way. There's no repeatability, there's no reusability to any of that. So creating an adaptable organization means that we need to sort of bake in reusability by design. If we need to think about building technology, building processes, building data products once and used many times. So that could be an algorithm. It could be an algorithm that sits on a shelf until someone needs to find a propensity of something, takes that off the shelf, tweaks it 20%, and we have a propensity model for something different in the business. It could be a data set. One data set, customers, products, the holy grail, that people use, know, understand, is well catalogued and all the rest of it. So reusability and repeatability by design helps you be more adaptable because your cost is lower and you've got efficiency within your organization. Now, the other thing is planning, strategy and planning. So whilst you need to be reactive around change, we also need to plan for the future. We can't just, the people who are sitting here thinking, oh God, but if we're just reacting to everything that happens, then we're never going in a direction. So what this is about is having a strategy that sets what we want to do over the next 3-5 years, normally aligned to the kind of time horizon of your business strategy if one exists, but something that says, that plans wide. It goes, what do we need to do over the next 3 to 5 years across all the things we need to think about, across all the capabilities we need, and across all the value that we want to deliver. But then we focus down and laser focus on specific business outcomes and iteratively building it. So covering all the bases when you're planning and defining strategy means that when you're implementing change, you know it's contributing towards an end goal that you're trying to put together. Now, last up is modern data leadership. So, and this is actually quite different in the US as it is in some other countries, but there's quite a sort of a history of data leaders coming from financial services. Financial services had lots of regulation. That meant that a big priority and a big focus has been on data management, rightly so. As people have left financial services and gone into other organizations, there's still a kind of legacy, if you like, of people still focusing on data management and rolling out master data management programs, data quality programs, all which is necessary. But modern data leadership is about stepping beyond data and technology and thinking in terms of being a business leader as a peer to the rest of the board. And modern data leadership is about creating an organization that can be adaptable to change and using data and insight and technology to enable organizations to do that. Those are some ideas, some thoughts, some things that we've implemented at clients, some things that we've educated people on and they have implemented successfully. Trying to do all of that is a challenge. Trying to have all of that in place is a challenge. It's a big cultural transformation that can be required. But I'm going to invite Ashley to join me on stage. We're going to talk about some of these ideas and concepts and talk about how we brought them to life at Ashley's place of work. So, Ashley. Does anyone want to come and sit down? Me?
Well, good morning. My name is Ashley Brinegar. I'm the Chief Data Officer for PCC Metals and Forgings. And if you ask me out there, though, and stop me and ask me what I do, I'd likely tell you I'm an engineer. So like Captain Erickson, I did not come to data through the traditional route of IT, information technology, or data as a data professional. I am a metallurgist by degree. So both my degrees are in metallurgy. I fell in love with aerospace aviation at a young age, subsequently fell in love with metallurgy, and then now data. I'm pulling those all together. And so if you stop me, I will likely talk your head off and ear off about metallurgy and aerospace and things like that. So I had this unique trajectory, I would say, through a GE. I came in as an engineer. Metallurgy to me is very systems-focused, systems-oriented, because the idea or theory of metals are one thing, the instantiation of them are another. So how you process them, how you make them, and what conditions are they being used, and for what purpose. So as you fly your helicopter, or my friends fly in their commercial jets as you all arrived, or your military jets, it's important that we have product that is performing right, it's reliable, and you're getting where you need to safely. So that frames the what I care about most in terms of where I spend my time at PCC. Along the way, I love these little intersection points. So metallurgy, the materials department is an intersection. It's not engineering, or it's not design engineering, but it is this enablement of, I want to design something, I need the product to do it. Then I moved over into supply chain because I was very curious as to, well, how do they make this? What goes on in the plant? And I fell in love with Six Sigma. So I went through the Six Sigma journey at GE, ultimately becoming the master black belt of the engineering division, and then going back into supply chain, as well as lean manufacturing. So I got into this realm of lean and Six Sigma, which is the home of data. So I was excited to hear Dr. Wang talk about, or as an introduction, he started with total quality management as a thought process. Well, this is exactly how I view the world of data. I view it through the realm of Six Sigma and lean. So we'll talk a lot about it, but I do things for a purpose. So data for me is only beneficial if it's for a purpose, and in my purpose, it's creating good metals, good products, because I want to be able to fly safely. I mean, I fly too. So, and then I moved into the supply chain, and then I needed another intersection point. So how do things work? And that's where I got into data. It's one of these embarrassing moments where I had somebody pull a query, and I give this information to the VP of Commercial Engines, and then a week later I asked again, and I got totally different results, and I had to start explaining why I was giving different data sets. But I got good data, I got it out of the system, right? And that started pulling the thread of how I got into data. Went over to Schneider for a little bit, and now at PCC. So I am the first Chief Data Officer at PCC Metals and Forgings. I'm the only one in the business unit, and yeah, it's been an exciting ride setting up the first ever team, but I'm there because I'm obsessed with understanding metallurgy and how you use data to improve it. So in our product, it's not like a chair dimensional where you can see if something's wrong. You're going to know visually looking at something if it's off. In metallurgy, you have to cut things up. You have to test them to understand, do I have the right chemistry? Do I have the right microstructure? Because it must perform a certain way. So that's always at the end of the line of our process. And so we have a huge opportunity within the metals and the aviation industry to say, I want to use data and connect what's going on my plant floor to the product. And if I can do that real time, I can make decisions on what I'm doing in the plant. I can guarantee the product I'm sending out into the field is going to meet the performance, the reliability, the safety, and so forth. So I'm obsessed with this idea. That's why we're here. That's why I came to PCC, because at an OEM, it can be GE, Boeing, Rolls, it doesn't matter. They are on this journey as well. And I had this realization and frustration when I was running rotating parts that I'm not going to get where I want to be unless the supply base comes along. So when I was presented with the opportunity to come try this and do this at the supplier, the tier 1 metals manufacturing from the ground floor up, I jumped on it, and so that's what I do. Yeah.
Great. Well, one of the things I love about what you said there is that you're a meteorologist.
Yeah.
I struggle to say that. I don't know why.
I'm a metallurgist. It's a word.
There we go. First, and a data's sort of like you sort of always you've had to do it to make your world better.
Yes.
Which I love, because a lot of people come into this industry the other way around. They're data, and then they have to go and learn the business, the industry that they're in. But you've already got that, which is great. Mm-hmm. But so what's been fascinating, so we've worked together for 2 or 3 years. And adaptability, this word that I've said many times in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, has been at the kind of like at the heart of what we've been trying to achieve together. Why, from your perspective, has that been important? Why is adaptability so important for you in your role or the business as a whole?
Yeah, so back to the engineering. One of the things I remember about thermodynamics is entropy is always increasing. And what does that mean? And some of the questions that guide my thoughts around, if you're going to change a process, do you even understand the process, how it got there? Do you understand the breadth of the complexity of it? Are you confident that if you change something, that you're going to get the intended results, and also you're not going to generate some unintended consequence? So these are some framings that I think through personally, and then in most spaces. I have to adapt. I'm a golfer, so I've had to adapt things that I do on the golf course as I get older, and the technology changes. So I've given up on some of my old clubs. I'll stop fighting, and I'll go with the new technology. I've had to adapt in the gym as I also get older, right? The things that I need to do functionally. So there's everything in every aspect of your life. You're adapting as your life and your environment is changing. So I just normally orient the things I do personally, thinking through that. So it matters to me as well at work. So I have an awesome team, and the vision that we've laid out is a good one. Now, what I thought coming into PCC is different than what I've experienced. So I thought, because I understand metallurgy, I actually understand PCC very well from a GE perspective. I know titanium metallurgy, and so I thought all of these things, and then you get there, and there's a little slap in the face. Even though I have all this context, I'm now introduced to a CIO that doesn't know I'm coming, and what's my role versus his role. And so some complexity is there. I think it's important just to be able to adapt, because I can't ever predict what's going on around. And at work, I mean, everybody knows disruptions in the supply chain. So we've had enormous different things impact PCC, from raw material pricing and such. And then also the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. A lot of OEMs buy titanium from Russia. So that shifted a lot of where the world was going to buy. So do we have the capacity to consume what the world's going to need? Do we have the operational efficiency, resiliency, and so forth? So all of that stuff is important, because you never know what's going to happen around you. I fundamentally, there's one other thought I was thinking. I read an article at Harvard in Harvard Business Review a number of years ago, and it was around, should your supply chains be efficient or should they be resilient? I don't think it's either or. I think it's a combination of both, because you can get to a point where you're so efficient that you crumble under the fact that you can't adapt. You don't have the space. And so what is that? That's important for us. If we're too lean and not thinking, we can't consume change with the market, and the market's changing faster than I would say years ago.
What's interesting with that adaptability point about you personally is that you apply that to the business context. Yeah. Is the business see it that way? Does PCC see themselves as needing to be adaptable?
Well, I think it depends on where you sit in the organization. I think they're getting there. I mean, they're starting to see, if you want to be a supplier for a tier 1 supplier to the biggest OEMs in the world, you have to. And there's only so long. I would say more on the component side, machining side of the house. You can have startups, once they start thinking about digital first, and then digital and I make a product, it's a very different orientation than saying I make products and then my data sits there, maybe I'll get around to using it. So I think the organization is starting to see that in different pockets. And like anything, there's going to be an inflection point somewhere where we hit critical mass and then we all move. But we have a barge, airspace is, we move a barge. I'd prefer a speedboat, but
gets you there quicker. The sort of adaptability point around and talking about data. So obviously data can help drive that adaptability, as I was talking about. Are there other, I suppose, cultural norms than an environment that needs to be in place to allow for adaptability?
Oh, this is good. So you made a point earlier too around people and culture and these types of things. So lean manufacturing, the core of lean manufacturing is people and behaviors to enable flow. And this is part of what I think it goes into something else we're going to chat about around the team. So I'm obsessed with this thought around when you're in these intersection roles, you start to see how groups play together, how they interact. And I moved around in my career to understand, okay, I need somebody's output for my input and so forth, right? So how does the system work? And if you step back and look at your system, you get a different perspective. So what I learned at GE and Schneider led into the way that I'm structuring and thinking about all this stuff culturally at PCC. So data is not going to be consumed. I did not believe data would be consumed at PCC, a traditional manufacturing house. I mean, we're talking 30-inch diameter, a couple thousand tons of red hot glowing metal that sits on a forge and somebody's pounding it. This is the type of environment we're talking about. Steel-toed boots, steel hats. You don't want to get too close, you might singe your beard. I mean, it is hot. So, and how do you introduce something like that? So they're not going to consume the data in a way that some people, you talked about earlier, data governance program this. I have to talk in the language of the business. I have to understand the business process, the operational rhythm. And so watching teams do this, I wanted an end-to-end team. So I'm a huge fan of skunks work teams or mission-based teams. You call them squads. I think at Schneider, I changed the data team to pods. And so this type of concept we brought to PCC. So I own, in my office, in the data office at Metals and Forgings, we have end-to-end. So I have lean manufacturing as a capability. So I want to understand from the business first in their language, what problem are we trying to solve? And having that context, I'm familiar with supply chain as well. And then I want metallurgists who happen to do data that can provide that context. So I have myself, I hired a brilliant data scientist in machine learning in the audience, Greg Wilson, also an aerospace engineer that has that context. We hired a metallurgist who knows how to run simulations. So we're providing this story of saying, I'm going to define the problem. I know how to measure it and analyze it with the context that's correct. And then I have the traditional data team, I would say an analyst, engineers, data governance as well to round it out and say, now you help me improve and operationalize these theories that we had. And then we're going to loop it all back with the lean manufacturing. We're going to pull it into the operating rhythms. Now, it doesn't always work well. But it works in pockets with the early adopters, right? You have a distribution of people, as everybody understands. You have your innovators, your early adopters. So for those folks, this is playing out very nicely. And then hopefully we scale this as we grow. But we're a small, nimble team, and that's the kind of concept culturally because we have to speak in their language. We don't talk about data governance at all, because they don't even understand it. They just glaze over. So I talk in the language. You have a yield problem, you have a delivery problem, you have scrap problem. This is what they care about. Time on a machine is money. So help me get how do I utilize my equipment? How do I not throw metal away? How do I deliver it on time to my customers? Right? That's the language we speak.
Yeah, this is the point I was making around focusing on outcomes, problems, opportunities. And rather than having you could have approached this as going, right, we need to sort out our product master data. We need to sort out the supply chain, statuses of how products move through the flow of the warehouse. You could have done that, and then that would have been a multi-year, multi-million-dollar program to implement master data management properly. No one would have signed that off. No one would have cared.
No.
But when we focus on, improving the quality of titanium, people care. And if to improve the quality of titanium, we need to fix some data stuff. Great, it's sort of table stakes at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. So we are making titanium alloys. We're making super base nickel alloys that go in engines. It matters. Like I said, we fly. I want to go home to my children safely. I want you to be on a mission saving somebody that needs help, and you're getting there and safely because you rely on your product, and it's important.
Well, that's actually a sort of almost a level above. That's kind of having a clear purpose and vision about where you're trying to get to. Like flying safely is a great purpose.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
But the kind of the route to get there is iteratively solving problems that the business care about, that they want to spend money on.
That's
Who
right.
doesn't want to spend money on improving titanium? Well, in your business anyway.
You should care.
Yeah.
All of you.
Yeah. It's all right. We've got a good person on the case, so we're all good.
No, it's great.
Can we talk a bit more about your team? You mentioned your
Yeah.
team there, and you have approached the building of this team differently from many in terms of like bringing metals knowledge and titanium knowledge and all these things into the team. And these people also happen to be able to do data, and it's not quite as stark as that, if I can use that phrase. But how's that worked in practice? Has that been received well? Was that easy to recruit for? How did the organisation sort of react to you bringing these people in rather than a data engineer that they know and understand, because that's what, it's in the market?
Actually, it's easier to bring them than to go out and say, I need a data engineer and architect, because they don't understand what that is. So when Greg joined me and a friend of ours as well, it's easy to explain. They're both coming from an OEM. They both have engineering experience. They have the context. So that was way easier to explain. Now, when I got to PCC, all of the analysts reported individually through the plants. I have since centralized that team to make this end-to-end team, because I'm also, as I heard somebody on Monday talk about, engineers are lazy. So if you can automate your job quickly, right? And I did not want to have to make the same, the idea of making the same report over and over and again is so dauntingly boring to me that I'm not doing it. So how do I get them to focus on one thing and I free them up to do something else, and we do it once, we add to as a feature. So because we're a products company, I'm so obsessed with the idea of a product anyway, because that's what we make, that why would I think any differently with what we're doing? We're small, we're nimble, we're never going to be a large team. So I have to be as efficient in providing speed to value, speed to market, if you will, or value to the business, and this is a way of doing it.
Why will you never be a large team? That's by choice?
I think it's more of a PCC structural issue, the way that they see organizations. Now, we'll get to some, we're new, we're the only team at PCC like this. So I can foresee we're gonna, we could grow, obviously. We've tripled our work in the last year, so we will grow, but we're not going to be at the scale of what I would have seen at GE or Schneider. I don't see that anytime soon, just based on their model of how they like to run.
Just culturally, it's lean,
yeah, it's
right?
a cultural.
Yeah.
And they like to push everything down to the plant, which is fine, but data is the thing that connects the plants, because our internal plants in PCC feed one another. So at TiMet, we make titanium. At SMC, we make nickel, but it feeds our sister company, which I'm also responsible for, because they make the next part in the process. So we feed each other, and then we feed the OEMs and so forth. So those types of things, data connects all of that. Sorry.
Just a quick, who knows what OEM means?
Oh,
Ashley
sorry.
said it a few times. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Not everyone. Go on now, what is it?
Yeah, original engine manufacturer, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, cool. People who make planes.
Yeah.
So you touched on products,
Yes.
data products there, and we were talking about this yesterday actually. So years back, I did some work in the police force, and this was probably in the early 2000s when business intelligence was the phrase. We were all doing data warehousing and business intelligence, and I went into this police force, sort of young, 20-something, and talking about business intelligence to all these guys in the police. And they just did not have a clue what I was talking about, because the word intelligence to them just meant something ever so slightly different, subtle, but very different in reality. They collect intelligence to solve crimes. And I was talking about business intelligence, meaning, basically dashboards and metrics on a screen. And so the language wasn't right, but the phraseology around the time was business intelligence. And we've now got this thing called data products, and I gave an impassioned pitch for it earlier about why it's important and it's outcome focused. But in an organization that is basically about building actual, real, physical products that people smash with hammer and make very hot, how has that idea of data products landed? Has that helped because you're using the same terminology, or has it hindered because products mean something slightly different?
So two parts to this. So first, it was the internal team. So as I said, the analysts all reported individually. They were making reports. This concept wasn't even one that they were familiar with. So when I centralized the team and I started introducing this, it was the first step at saying, this is what I think about products. Like when you think about a product, you've designed something for a purpose. And I use this example to them like a vertical cake slice. I want to slice the cake and it tastes good all the way down. I don't want to build layers and then it tastes like garbage. I think about the Friends episode where Rachel's making that trifle and then she puts the beef in with the trifle. Right? Like I want to be able to scoop down and it tastes nice. So we talk about products and what they serve, and then how you can add on features. And that orientation had to happen first with the team. So I don't want you to go into the database and start doing things first. I want you to go understand on the shop floor, what exactly are they asking for? What problem are they solving? How do they take this data and answer the question? Because I know if I'm in this role, here's what I'm going to do first, and here's what I want to ask, and these are the things I care about because I'm a quality professional and I need to ship good product, those types of things. So we started having them model these things out. Could you guide them through a scenario that you're answering these questions? Can you think about how you'd solve it, and then what features would you add on? So that was the first step of explaining this to the internal team. And I think that's been a great transition. So, and I also run them in an agile methodology. So we have daily stand-ups that match the manufacturing cadence. And I really want us to think through how we run matches how the business runs. And I do report in the business. So I don't report through IT. I report through the technology organization and supply chain. So that does help there. So that was the first step, and we're still learning and growing. And in fact, it's an ebb and flow. So some people got it very quickly, some people didn't, and then when they have, it's like, oh, this exercise really helped me think about how I was gonna, if you spend the time up front defining the problem clearly, the solution of it or the implementation of it becomes a lot faster. So we spend a lot of time there. Now, as far as the organization, I don't actually try to explain data products. whatsoever to the organization because it's just not there. So I did try to align these things and say, we buy raw material from Australia or Japan. I mean, it comes in looking like sand, and it's, titanium that looks like sponge, okay? And it's useless to us in this form, right? We have to melt it, we have to forge it, we have to make a product, and then it has the value, right? It has a purpose. And so I try to explain to the organization every once in a while, like, yeah, your data just sitting in that database, it's in a German table that I don't know German. So it's all messy, you guys have done all sorts of things, whatever. That is of little value. The value is when you've got it there and it answers a question. So I do try to explain to them in their language, I have raw material, and I have to put in operations, I have to put in equipment that melts and forges and converts to a product, and then I will give you something of value. So I use it almost in that analogous language, but I don't know, Greg, we don't really use the term data products. Now, we think about it that way because, again, these problems that we have per plant, I mean, systemically, the aerospace industry has similar themed problems. And so when we do something, we want to do it well and think about, well, somebody else is going to ask this in another plant because they're all structurally running similar. So let's think about how we would design and build something so that I'm just inputting some specific nuance things, and now I'm returning something back to them faster with a new feature. But we don't use the actual language because it's not helpful.
Yeah, so sometimes it can be, sometimes it can't be, but you're using analogy, metaphor, stories to help articulate the value that you're trying to deliver. Now, the other thing I didn't actually explain that well on my data product slide is it's all about focusing on building a valuable product at the end, or a valuable thing at the end, let's call it, not product. And that's the purpose, is to kind of define a problem that we're trying to solve and build a solution for it. We'll call it data products privately, but people just need to care we're fixing and solving a problem.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And it's hard, it's not easy. And I was telling Valerie yesterday, even when we build the dashboards and analytics, there's this tension that we have internally. Do we build it the way that I think it should be built, or we as a group, because this is where we need to get the team? Or do we allow them to automate their stupid Excel file in the form that they're used to doing it? And we're going to step them into this environment. And then they're all whiny about it because it's complex and they've got all these filters and slicers. What is that right tension? So sometimes it's hard. So where do we go? We play around with that a lot of how do you get people in the adoption space by not overwhelming them as well. So.
Great. Well, we're thank you, by the way. We're going to turn to questions either from online, if there's any on the app, or just from the room. We've got about, I think, 18 minutes, so got time for a few for sure.
We'll start with one that's online. They asked, this is for you, Ashley. Have you found that using analogies and comparisons with engineering and metallurgy help you drive data understanding and adoption at PCC?
Yes.
A lesson in closed questions.
Yes, I do, because when I'm out on the shop floor, if you're inquisitive about what's going on with them, if you're speaking to them in their language, it just goes better. I have empathy for what's going on. I mean, when you walk through a U.S. anywhere, manufacturing is a tough job. And the notion, sometimes we're all sitting here, and if you really looked and saw how dirty and dangerous some of these jobs are, that people make metal so we go across bridges or fly or whatever, and sitting in there, and they do it every day. And we have a plant in Vegas, so I will tell you, the plant can be 140 degrees when you're in the shop floor. It is so hot, and then you're in a welding jacket, and you're in a hard hat and steel-toed boots. It is not a pleasant environment every day. So, yeah, I believe when you go out there and you speak in their language and you don't try to teach them, you let them teach you, and then you say, okay, here's how I could add in this. It goes way smoother than not. So.
But it's a dry heat, right? It was a dry heat.
That's what they say.
They gave me the mic, Jason. It's all over now.
It's all over.
I appreciate your anecdote about talking to the police force and using the word intelligence. They probably didn't understand what business meant either, right?
Also
business
true,
intelligence. Yeah. But actually, you mentioned that when you got there was a CIO who wasn't quite sure. How did that struggle go? I think a lot of organizations that bring in a chief data officer have this struggle with CIOs as to what's in their remit, what's in yours. But can you kind of elaborate on how that went?
So it is an ongoing, relationship and struggle and good, and we have good days, we have bad days. So I don't think there's ever, we'll see. So because I'm new and this is not a role that they've had, it was, what is she doing here? And the first aspect of, I think, internal to our team too was, are they here to take our job? I don't understand what they're doing. They're playing around in our space. And so we set up we do a lot. So I'm a big fan of offsites and leadership, and what are we doing for the quarter? What did we do last quarter? How do we need to iterate those types of things? How do we plan? And I bring them in, so I'm into bringing them into everything because I agree, I'm successful with them. And then we've done a lunch and learn. So when we're doing things, we say, this is what we're doing. This is what we're asked to do being delivered. Here's an example. Here's another. So I'm trying to take off the fear of, oh, we're not doing the same thing. We need each other. But here, this is what we're doing on a lean event. And here's what we did for operations research, building a scheduling tool, this discrete scheduling tool, or whatever the case is. So when the more we have been doing that kind of thing and bringing them in the fold and then showing them, I think we have good days and we have better, we could have better days, and we will. We will.
Can I add something to that? So whether it's the CIO or completely different role, data leadership role is basically a toe-treading nightmare. It's a horizontal, it cuts across all business units, it cuts across all processes, it moves between every system. It's like it could become minister without portfolio, but it could be everything, and either end of those spectrums is quite challenging. So my view on this situation is to clarify responsibility. You have to be clear on what's the responsibility here, what's the responsibility here. Early days that can be hard if someone didn't know you were joining the business, but finding some common ground, finding some differences, really important, building credibility, doing some things differently that the people that you may be treading on toes aren't responsible for, just starts to help build some trust, build some credibility, build a relationship. But that clarification of role and responsibility, it doesn't matter if you've got a CDO, a CIO, and a CTO, as long as you're clear on what everyone's responsibility is and when you collaborate and when you don't, and when you share and when you don't, that's what's most important.
I would say back to the adaptability thing. I've had to be so adaptable in this space. And Eileen from Chevron gave me a really great perspective on CIOs on Monday that I didn't even think about. So this is a space, of all the manufacturing, I've been in engineering, I've been in manufacturing, I understand commercial. Now data. IT is a space that I've never went into a foray, so I make assumptions, these types of things, as he does. And so it's adaptability of learning. Give me another perspective from a former CIO that I'm missing, because I'm missing something. So I'm into, all right, let me try this again. I'm going to charge the mountain again. So I round up the mountain, I get roll back down, okay, I got another plan. So I'm constantly pivoting and moving.
Have you tried any data/digital first initiatives? I mean, you talked about, that would be the ideal way to build it out.
Yeah.
Have you done any, or are you planning anything that you can share with us, your thought process?
We do it internally. I've not to the organization. We are new, and so this consumption is not there yet. I don't think we have critical mass. There are pockets of people that understand this in the business that are willing to stand up and try, but we're not at a critical mass yet where the entire organization understands this, right? They're like, we are manufacturing. Obviously, we have data. It's in that's what we hear. We have the data, it's in the database, Ashley, it's fine. We'll get it when we need it, right? But the problem is when you need it, and then you probably have to go back 10, depending on the issue, you could be pulling data for 10, 15 years and trying to make, needle out of the haystack. So I would say internal as a group, we think about what is our data first strategy, how do we do this, but then how do I translate that into how I actually go out in the business is different. Yeah, at the moment. Now I hope this changes so that I can be more explicit about it. But I do some other things communication-wise and things like that. So, you're welcome.
I was going to say, we had a lot of discussion about building a coalition to support you, especially when you have a small team. This is for both. Do you see in this space a specific theme that you can connect with the business strategy to what you're doing? So for example, you talk about, hey, I need to have good data so the airplanes are actually good. It's safety. So that might be maybe a theme that you are using to kind of inspire people to get into the data piece, but I don't know, maybe the resiliency versus efficiency. What are the themes that you both have found that are very impactful that help you build that coalition?
So the way that I view this, we do everything tied to the business goals and objectives. So I actually, as an MBB, I do a lot of facilitation. So I help facilitate TimeMed's goals and objectives, for instance. And they follow around the pillars of traditional, I would say lean, safety, quality, delivery, cost. I mean, you're not getting away from these things. They are bread and butter type activities in manufacturing. So what is it the business is doing in terms of where they want to focus, and then everything we do tiers from there. I don't build data for the sake of data. I don't understand it that way. So everything I do is for a purpose. So if I know safety is a critical aspect of melting, then I'm going to do something on safety. If you say quality, or what does that mean? So everything we're tiering that way, that does help because it's directly related to this is what you want, well, I'm going to help you get the how kind of thing. Does that answer your question? So I'd say those are our big themes there.
The really interesting thing, because there's a phrase that's being said quite a lot in the industry, which is align to the business strategy. Everyone says that now, align to the business strategy, which is very true, but it's not always well articulated. So who's got the paper that says what their business strategy is, and then when you read it, enough information and detail that you can like attach to things? If you have one, awesome, align to it. But also, data isn't about just aligning to the strategy, it's about shaping it. So data can play a part in shaping what the strategy should be, and if we just act as a subservient part to seeing whether the strategy is working, then we're missing a trick of shaping a really quality business. And when you're building a data strategy, you want to pin to the things that are most important. Hopefully that's in a strategic document somewhere. But often you have to hunt. You have to find what problems are there in this business. We're not getting enough students in the university. We're not acquiring enough customers quick enough. We're losing customers at the end of each contract. Those are like the real things. Whether it's the strategy to fix those problems or not, you probably need to. But finding a way, having the operating model of prioritizing which of those things are most important, normally driven by how valuable it would be to fix the problem and how easy or difficult it would be to fix it. But that, I find if you look at it at those few different lenses, you can find like where's the biggest prize here. I talk about pots of gold, but where's the biggest prize for solving challenges with data?
Okay, got another online question. This one's for you, Jason. How do you recommend measuring culture and people pillar, and how do you help organizations evolve towards an optimal state?
Yeah, it's a good question. So culture, it can be measured actually if you define the behaviors and mindsets and like activities and actions that you want to see. And if you can define those, then you can start to say, can we see them? Are they improving? Are they getting better? But I actually think the question here is how do we measure value of doing data? How do we measure value of the mass of things that we're trying to achieve? Because just measuring culture or just measuring skills is really measuring capability. And the only way you get value out of data is by applying all the things we've talked about actually, is applying it to measuring the things that we're trying to improve, applying data to a problem like customer acquisition and seeing if we acquired more customers because we applied data to that problem. So the value comes from delivering business value, not from chipping away at improving capability. Mm-hmm. That's almost a means to an end, but the end is we've put some money in the till or we've reduced the cost of running the business.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question for Ashley. Having worked in a melt shop, I uniquely appreciate your comment about heat.
It's very hot.
My question
My
is,
hair doesn't
PCC is a terrific company. How have you tried to convince the C-suite that data can actually make a difference in a company that is literally on the top of its game on everything? How have you done that?
So that's been person specific, I would say. The old COO that brought me in came from Rolls-Royce. So there was an understanding of what this could do, where the industry was going. And I believe that was the impetus of my generation of my role. Like we have this gap. So I think in terms of convincing him, I was okay there. I would say the day-to-day leaders, that was a challenge. I think with anything, change management is a pillar of all of this. And so what relationships am I building? How am I convincing them? So that took, for the key VPs that we had, that was a significant amount of time. I travel every other week. So I show up in the plants. We do line walks. So I'm there with them hearing. So that helps because I'm not just sitting in my, we're a division team. And it's like that adage, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help. They don't like it. They don't like that feeling of the central team is coming. They come down, they tell me where my problems are, and then they leave. I am so attuned to this from GE days that we don't operate that way. So this is how I do that. Now, the other COO came from automotive, so this is bread and butter with them. So I do well there. Our new one is not familiar with this. He understands it, but how do you effectuate that? This is our ebb and flow right now. Because the question is, even if you build these data products, dashboards, solutions, who's to say somebody's going to do anything with them? Right, like they have to take action off these insights. They have to effectuate that in the plant. So even if I point out, hey, your biggest scrap problem is right here, your biggest yield, they have to physically go do something to change that, right? And so that's why I brought in the lean manufacturing with the hope that I'm going to start pulling these closed loop, pull these things through, which is why I wanted it on the team. I didn't want it some independent thing over here. So I would say, we're 2.5 years in. I just see this going up. We're getting to a point, and unfortunately, when something goes wrong, that's, usually people take a look at it, but that's kind of where we are now. It's person specific.
All right, we have.
Wearing a beard? Now is that we are not wearing a beard?
Exactly.
He left them out down the
All right, we have time for one more question, so I'll go to online since I don't see anybody's hands up. How do you prioritize between so many data initiatives, data ecosystem modernization, customer engagement, data stewardship, data literacy? Is there an order that you would recommend?
You give your.
Yeah, so yes, the order I would recommend is completely independent from any other order in any other business. It has to be based on where is the organization now, how good are they at certain things, how much better do they want to be. You don't need to be the best at everything. You might want to be world-class in technology and just okay in something else. So it needs to be company specific. It needs to be tailored to what that organization wants to do. Where are they? Where do they want to get to? And how big is the prize? How much value is there in this business to apply data and drive transformation? Because that's when that helps you prioritize. So if you remember the slide with the six pillars, the capabilities that you build need to be aligned to the value. So if improving one of these challenges that you talked about, Ashley, is the highest priority, then I'll shape all of the capabilities that I need to build aligned to solving that problem. Mm-hmm. But because I've defined a strategy over the next 3 years, I know it contributes to where we're heading. So there will be an order. There will be an order, but it will be specific and dependent on where the company's at today and where they're trying to get to. Cool.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Ashley.
Scott.
Any closing comments?
Yeah, I've got a couple of closing comments. So, no, we've done that. You, on the way out, Hayley from the Cynozure team is going to give you a copy of my book. It's called Data Means Business. And it talks about some of these, all of these concepts that I've just talked about in this session. Yeah, you'll get a free copy. So grab one on the way out. Hayley might ask to scan a badge. I'm not sure. Yes. Also, I'm going to run an Ask Me Anything as well around at the stand. So we're at the stand, the big purple stand next to the food and coffee area. So I'm going to go there now. So just if you did want to carry on the conversation, swing by. We also have a scorecard, which is about assessing your data strategy. So it's a small bunch of questions. You fill in the scorecard, and it gives you a tailored score for each of the 6 pillars of the data strategy that I showed you earlier. It gives you some recommendations based on where you are, so give you some pointers. It's a kind of like temperature check, just to see kind of where your main priorities are. And then you can head to our stand. If you've seen the stand with the M&Ms, that's us. We'll create a bag, which is a visual representation of the score that you get. So each color M&M relates to a pillar of the strategy. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you.